Story 1. Something felt off about room 14 the moment I walked in. I couldn't name it then. I can name it now. My sister and I had been on the road for almost 9 hours. It was a spontaneous trip, the kind you plan the night before with a half-charged laptop and too much optimism. We were driving down the coast, splitting costs, staying wherever was cheap and had availability. The Sea Breeze Inn had a 3.1-star rating online. The reviews said things like it's fine for the price and the sheets were clean, so that's something. We weren't expecting anything nice. We just needed a bed. We pulled in around 9 p.m. The parking lot was half lit, one of the overhead lamps flickering in a slow, lazy rhythm like it had been doing it for years and nobody had bothered to fix it. There were maybe 5 other cars scattered across the lot. A minivan with a cracked tail light. A sedan with a graduation tassel hanging from the rear view. Nothing alarming. Just a quiet Tuesday night at a forgettable motel off a state highway. The woman at the front desk was friendly. That's the part one keep coming back to. How normal she seemed. Middle-aged. Reading glasses on a beaded chain. A small electric fan humming on the counter beside her. She handed us 2 key cards and a paper sleeve. Told us we were in room 14, ground floor, and said the pool was closed for the season, but the ice machine on our floor worked fine. She smiled. We smiled back. My sister made a joke about needing ice for the 6-pack we had in the cooler. The woman laughed. Room 14 was at the far end of the ground floor corridor. Last door on the right before a fire exit. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and something underneath it. Something older, like carpet that had been wet too many times. The lights overhead were that particular shade of yellow that makes everyone look slightly ill. I unlocked the door and we went in. 2 queen beds, heavy curtains, a window AC unit that rattled when the compressor kicked on. There was a TV bolted to the dresser and a laminated card on the nightstand listing checkout time and the Wi-Fi password. Normal motel room. I dropped my bag on the bed nearest the window and went straight to the bathroom. When I came out, my sister was already scrolling her phone. Shoes off, settled in. I pulled the curtain back slightly to check the parking lot view. Just habit, and then sat on my bed and opened my own phone. That's when I noticed the peephole. Peepholes are designed to let you see out. Wide-angle lens, convex glass, covers the full hallway. Standard on every motel door I've ever seen. But this one was missing its outer cover. Not cracked, not hanging loose. The cover was simply gone. There was just a small circular hole in the door, maybe the size of a pencil eraser, with the orange hallway light coming through in a thin, steady sliver. I stared at it for a moment. Old motel, old hardware. Cover probably fell off years ago and no one replaced it. That's what I told myself. I looked away, looked back at my phone. I turned off my screen to check the time using the brightness of the room. In the sudden dimness, the peephole was more visible, just that little thread of orange light cutting through the dark door. Then it blinked out. I sat very still. The orange sliver was gone, not flickering, completely blocked, like something had been placed directly against the other side of the lens. I watched it for 3 full seconds. 4, 5. Then the light came back. I exhaled, told myself the hallway light had flickered, told myself it was nothing. Then it blinked out again. Same duration, same complete darkness. And then back, slow and deliberate, like breathing, like the rhythm of someone pressing their face close, pulling back, and pressing close again. My sister was still on her phone. I didn't say anything. I don't know why. I think part of me didn't want to be wrong, didn't want to alarm her over a flickering light. So I just watched, and it happened a 3rd time. I set my phone down quietly and stood up. I crossed the room without turning on any additional lights. I pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty, long, yellow lit, completely still. The ice machine sat at the far end, humming. Nobody there. I stepped back. looked down at the gap under the door. There was about a half-inch of space between the door and the carpet, and in that gap, I could see the shadow of 2 feet. Someone was standing directly on the other side of our door, completely still, not walking past, not pausing to check a room number, standing there. Every hair on my body stood up. I looked at my sister. She still hadn't noticed anything. I made a decision without thinking about it too hard. I crossed the room fast, balled my fist, and knocked hard on the door from the inside. 3 sharp, loud hits. The feet moved immediately. I heard sneakers squeaking on linoleum, fast, getting quieter. I yanked the chain off and had the door open within 4 seconds. The hallway was empty in both directions. I looked left, right, all the way to the fire exit. Nothing. No one. My sister was sitting up now, fully alert. I told her what I'd seen. She went pale. I called the front desk. The same friendly woman answered. I told her someone had been standing outside our door and asked her to send someone to check the hallway. She apologized and said she'd send the night maintenance man right away. He appeared in less than 2 minutes. That detail bothered me when I thought about it later. Our room was at the far end of the building. The front desk was near the entrance, the opposite end. 2 minutes was fast. Too fast to have walked from there. He was a heavy-set man in a gray uniform shirt, flashlight in hand. He checked the hallway in both directions, tried the fire exit door, and came back with a shrug. Said it was probably a guest who'd gotten confused about which room was his. Maybe had a few drinks. He said it with the practiced ease of someone delivering a rehearsed explanation. He smiled and left. I put the chair under the handle. My sister slept with the lights on. I barely slept at all. In the morning, I went outside and looked at our door from the hallway side in full daylight. The peephole assembly was completely intact, lens, housing, outer cover, all of it. I stood there staring at it, trying to reconcile that with what I'd seen the night before. Then I looked closer. The metal ring around the housing had fresh scratches on it. Not old wear, fresh ones. Bright silver where the paint had been scraped away. The kind of marks a flathead screwdriver leaves when you're trying to get purchase on something circular. The kind of marks left by someone who had recently removed something and then put it back. That cover hadn't fallen off years ago. Someone had unscrewed it before we checked in. Someone who knew which room would be occupied that night, and then put it back before we woke up so that by morning, there would be no evidence. Just a door, just a room, just 2 women who might convince themselves they'd imagined it. They had prepared that room for us. Story 2. Someone was trying to get into my motel room just after midnight. I've been in sales for 11 years. That means roughly 40 to 50 hotel nights a year, every year, in whatever mid-range or budget property is closest to wherever I need to be at 8 the next morning. I've stayed in places that smelled like mildew and places that smelled like chemicals used to cover the mildew. I've had neighbors who screamed at each other until 3 a.m. and neighbors I never heard at all. You develop a tolerance for the strangeness of temporary spaces. You learn to sleep through things. But the Pinecrest Lodge was different. It was a Wednesday in October. I was cutting across the state on a 3-day route, and the Pinecrest was cheap, had availability, and was right off the exit I needed. It was an old-style motor court, a U-shaped row of single-story rooms built around a gravel parking lot, the kind of layout they stopped making in the 1970s. Each room door faced the outside, directly onto the lot, which meant there was no interior hallway between you and the night air, just a door and a parking lot. My room was number 7, on the left arm of the U. From my window, I could see the small illuminated office at the base of the lot, and across the way, the right arm of rooms, dark and quiet. The woman at check-in had been efficient and pleasant. Room key, room number, Wi-Fi password on a card. She told me the diner across the highway closed at 10, but the vending machines by the office were stocked. I thanked her and carried my bag to room 7. The room itself was dated but clean. wood-paneled walls, a bedspread with a geometric pattern that belonged in a different decade, a bathroom with a light that took a moment to warm up. The window AC rattled. The deadbolt was solid. I checked it twice, old habit, and turned on the TV for background noise while I got ready for bed. I was asleep by 10. I don't know exactly what woke me, but I came out of sleep already alert, already listening. The TV was still on, muted now. I must have hit the button in my sleep. The room was dark except for the screen's pale glow and the thin line of exterior light under the door. Then I heard it, a clicking sound at the door, soft but methodical, not knocking, nothing so direct as that. More like something probing, testing, working carefully at the lock mechanism. It went on for about 10 seconds and then stopped completely. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, heart going fast. I told myself it was the door settling, or a branch scraping the frame from outside, or just the sounds an old building makes. I got up, checked the deadbolt, still engaged, looked through the peephole. The gravel lot was orange lit and empty. 2 cars parked on the far side. A moth circling the lamp by the office. Nothing else. I went back to bed. Took me a long time to fall back asleep. At 12:34 a.m., I know because I checked my phone, it started again. The same clicking, the same careful, unhurried pace. 10 seconds, 15. I was already moving before it stopped. I pulled on my shoes without tying them, crossed the room, and yanked the door open hard. A man was standing there. He was maybe 55, solidly built, wearing a dark work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. When the door opened, he took a quick step backward and held both hands up. The universal gesture of I mean no harm, though in my experience, people who truly mean no harm rarely need to make it. He told me he was sorry, said he'd had a few drinks, thought this was his room. Room 17, he said, and pointed across the lot toward the far end of the right arm of the U. I looked at him. Room 17 was on the complete opposite side of the motor court. Not adjacent to mine, not close to mine, not in any reasonable direction you'd wander if you were confused about which room was yours. You'd have to walk past the office and around the entire lot to get from 17 to 7. I didn't say any of that. I just watched him. He apologized again, turned, and walked across the gravel toward room 17. I stood in my doorway and watched the whole way. He reached the door, produced a key, and let himself in without any hesitation. The light came on inside. I waited. The light stayed on. I stepped back inside but left my door open a crack while I looked down at my doorstep. My lock was an old barrel type, a round, recessed cylinder with a worn brass plate around it. On the plate, and in the gravel directly below my door, I could see marks pressed into the small stones. Thin parallel lines close together, like something flat and narrow had been set down there and leaned against the door, like a case of some kind, like tools. I took a photo of the lock and of the marks in the gravel. Then I went inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and texted the front desk number from the check in card. I explained what had happened and asked a direct question. Do you have a guest in room 17? 3 minutes passed. 5, then 8. The reply came, we don't have a guest in room 17. That room is unoccupied. I read it twice, then I read it a third time. I thought about the man, the way he'd held up his hands, the way he'd walked to that room with complete confidence, no hesitation, like someone who had been there before. I thought about the key, a physical key, not a card, because this was that kind of place. I thought about where you get a physical key to a motel room that isn't yours. I packed my bag in the dark. I didn't turn on a single light. I moved slowly and quietly, the way you move when you don't want anyone outside to see shadows shifting behind a curtain. I took everything, every charger, every toiletry, left nothing behind, and I carried my bag to my car without making noise on the gravel. As I backed out of the lot, I looked in my rearview mirror at room 17. The light inside was off. The window was dark. I pulled out onto the highway. I drove. I watched the mirror. I was maybe a quarter mile out when I glanced back and saw it. A faint glow appearing in the window of room 17. Just the one window illuminated, visible from the road. Like someone standing near the glass, watching taillights disappear. I drove to a gas station 12 miles down the highway and sat in the lit parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself call the non-emergency sheriff's line. I told them everything: the clicking, the man, the room, the tool marks in the gravel, the text from the desk. The deputy took my information and said they'd send someone to check. They never called me back. I followed up twice over the next week. Both times I was told the report was on file and someone would be in touch. No one ever was. I don't know what they found in room 17 that night, if anything. I don't know who the man was, or how he had a key, or what exactly was in whatever he'd set down on my doorstep for 15 minutes while he worked at my lock. What I know is this: he spent 20 minutes trying to get into my room, and when I opened the door, he had an explanation ready. Practiced, calm. The story of a drunk man who had the wrong room. He even pointed to a room and walked to it and used a key. He had planned for the possibility that I would open the door. That's the part one can't stop thinking about. Not that he was there, but that he had already thought about what to say if I caught him. Story 3. I knew something was wrong with that motel before I even checked in. I just didn't listen to it. There's a version of that night where I drive past, where I look at the sign, the Driftwood Motor Inn, 3 letters burned out, the vacancy light blinking in a way that felt less like an invitation and more like a warning, and I keep going. Find a 24-hour truck stop, sleep in my car for a few hours, wait out the storm. That version exists. I just didn't choose it. It was February. I'd been driving Highway 61 since early afternoon, heading north to visit my uncle after a family thing that had come up suddenly. The weather forecast had said possible snow. By 9 p.m. it was saying blizzard, and the roads were already starting to show ice in my headlights. I was still 3 hours from my destination and my visibility was dropping. The Driftwood was the first motel I'd seen in 40 miles. The parking lot had one other car in it, a truck, old and heavy, parked near the far end of the building with the kind of stillness that made it look like it had been there for days. The sign above the office door was missing the letters W, O, and D, which left it reading Driftum Trinn. I noticed all of these things. I went inside anyway. The man at the front desk was somewhere in his 60s, gray-bearded, wearing a flannel shirt. He had a pair of reading glasses low on his nose and a small television on the counter showing nothing but static. He didn't look up when I came in. He waited until I reached the counter, and then he looked at me in a way that I've thought about many times since. Not unfriendly exactly, but something else. Like he was calculating something. He slid a metal key across the counter without me asking. "Room 9, he said. End of the hall." I asked if there were any other guests tonight, the way you do when you're alone and it's late and the parking lot is nearly empty. "Just you," he said. He went back to his television. The corridor was long and narrow, lit by fluorescent tubes that buzzed at a frequency that set my teeth on edge. The carpet was a deep burgundy that had gone patchy in the center from years of foot traffic. Room numbers on each door in cheap gold plastic. I passed room 3, room 5, room 7, then room 10, and I noticed the door to room 10 had a strip of masking tape across the lock with the word "closed" written on it in black marker. Then room 9, the very last door, tucked against a wall that I assumed was the exterior of the building. I let myself in. Standard room, full bed, small desk, a window that looked out onto nothing but darkness and snow. The heater under the window groaned when I turned it on and then settled into a low hum. I hung my coat, took off my boots, went to the bathroom. When I came out, the chain lock on the door was moving. Not swinging dramatically, just shifting gently the way a hanging thing moves after it's been disturbed. Back and forth, slowing down, like it had just been touched. I stood completely still in the middle of the room and watched it settle. I tried to think of a rational explanation. Maybe the heat coming on had caused some air movement. Maybe I'd brushed it when I came in and was only noticing it now. Maybe the building was old and settled in ways that made things swing. I stood there for a long time building that case. Then I put the chain on, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop to check the road conditions. The footsteps started about 20 minutes later. They came from the wall to my left, a slow, measured pacing back and forth the length of the shared wall. The sound was clear and deliberate, not the sound of a building contracting in the cold. Not pipes, footsteps, someone walking, reaching one end of something, pausing, turning, walking back. I closed my laptop. I turned off the bedside lamp and sat in the dark and listened. They didn't stop. Same pace, same path, back and forth, back and forth. I counted the steps each time, 7 going one direction, a pause, 7 coming back. Even unhurried, like someone who had been doing this for a long time. I pulled up the motel's website on my phone, looking for anything, a floor plan, a gallery photo, anything that showed the layout. I found it in the photo section, a simple diagram of the building. Room 9 was clearly the last room on the left side of the corridor. And on the other side of room 9's left wall, the wall where the footsteps were coming from, was room 10. Room 10, the one with the masking tape, the one marked closed. I sat there with my phone in my hand and listened to someone pace back and forth inside a closed room. I called the front desk. It rang 4 times. Then the man picked up. He didn't say anything, no greeting, no driftwood motor in. "Can I help you?" He just picked up and breathed. I told him I could hear footsteps in room 10. He said room 10 had been closed since October. I said I understood that, but I was still hearing footsteps. There was a pause that lasted long enough that I thought he might have put the phone down. Then he said, "I'll come check." I kept the phone in my hand. I watched the gap under the door, waiting for a flashlight beam in the hallway. Took longer than it should have. 5 minutes, maybe closer to 7. Then I saw it, a thin bar of white light moving down the corridor, stopping at the door next to mine. I heard a key enter a lock, the click of a door opening. Then silence, a long, absolute silence. Not the silence of a quick look around, but the silence of someone standing very still in a dark room. Then the man's voice came through the wall. It came through clearly, the way sound travels between 2 rooms separated by a single thin partition. He was right there on the other side of the wall from where I was sitting. He was in room 10, standing in a closed and supposedly empty room at 10 o'clock on a winter night. "There's nobody in here," he said. He said it quietly, not the way you'd call out to reassure a nervous guest. The way you'd say it to someone who was standing close to you. Someone you were talking to in a low voice so the person in the next room wouldn't hear. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I sat on the edge of that bed with my knees drawn up and my back against the headboard, and I stayed exactly like that until 5:15 in the morning, when the darkness outside the window started to shift toward gray. The footsteps had stopped at some point during the night. I hadn't noticed when. I'd been too focused on listening to everything else. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the glass, the occasional low sound from the room next door that might have been settling and might have been breathing. At 5:15 I got up, put on my coat and boots, and picked up my bag. I did not use the bathroom. I did not check out. I walked down the corridor without looking at the door of room 10, pushed through the front entrance without looking toward the desk, and drove away in the early gray light. It was only once I was back on the highway, heater running, snow chains rattling, that I let myself think clearly about the chain lock. It had been swinging when I came out of the bathroom. I told myself I'd bumped it on the way in without noticing, but I had a clear memory of coming through that door, setting down my bag, turning to push the door shut, throwing the deadbolt. I hadn't touched the chain. I hadn't gone near it. The chain had been swinging because someone had just taken it off. Someone who had been inside that room when I arrived, who slipped out through the connecting door to room 10 while I was in the bathroom, who spent the rest of the night on the other side of that wall waiting for something. I don't know what they were waiting for. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't called the front desk, or if I had fallen asleep, or if the chain had been off instead of on. I just know that when the man said there's nobody in here, he wasn't talking to me.